Namaskar. Namaskar and welcome to the Eikam series of Gita on the go. After that very, very powerful last chapter on the Karma Yoga, which was chapter 3, this is chapter 4, which is the Jnana Karma Sanyas Yoga. Literally translated as giving up on karma or the ability to renounce your karma through jnana or wisdom. Now, while I know that sounds very contradictory within its own self, in this chapter we shall figure out how the path of wisdom is the path to allowing yourself to shed your karmic baggage, to balance your karmic ledger, to actually arrive at that zero PNL state. There will be three themes that we will broadly cover in this chapter. These three themes are going to be, the first one is about how there is inaction in action and there is action in inaction. This is also a build up to the last time when we were talking about karma, and we spoke about how everything is karma. Every breath, every action, every thought, every emotion, everything is karma. So similarly, the understanding of how karma is action in inaction and inaction in action will be the first part of understanding this chapter. In the second part of this chapter, and that is a build up on where we left off the last chapter, which was about how do you live in awareness? How do you move your entire existence into the state of nishkam karma? Because karma is happening, like we said, with every breath, but how do you detach yourself from it? And in this one, we move, while last time we spoke about being awareness, living in awareness of your body, your actions, your mind, your emotions, and your intellect, your thoughts. This time we move it one level above to say how can your state of mind or the way you approach your own self is a state of Yagya. Everything becomes a Yagya, and we will talk about that and how that allows you to move into the state of Nishkam Karma. And therefore, the third aspect of it, which is indeed what Bhagwan Sri Krishna is doing to Arjun at the battlefield, which is finding guidance, finding your own master. How the presence of a master, whether that master be, and we'll talk about it, whether it needs to be a person or a text, whatever it may be, but finding your beacon, your guidance, your coach, your master in this journey of not renouncing your karma, but giving up your karma through the process of wisdom or jnana. With that, we welcome you again to chapter 4, which is the Jnana Karma Sanyas Yoga on the Eikam series of Gita on the Go. And it is with great pleasure that I'm very happy to welcome Samir back with us. Namaskar, Samir.
Namaskar. So thank you again, Eika, for a very nice introduction. And the title itself, as you have already mentioned, is very contradictory. Giving up karma. Now, just a little while back when we were studying chapter 3, we saw that karma is inevitable. And now the title is giving up karma. Actually, it's not about giving up karma. Let's say that we start doing our karma the way chapter 3 tells us to do. Then there is going to be consequence. I mean, that's obvious, right? Can you stop being affected by the consequence? Let me give a different example. Let me take an example. I'm sure you know about this, is the fact that I love rasagullas.
I was just waiting for the rasagullas to make their entry.
So now, let's assume that I have lived a very debauched life of eating rasagullas throughout my life for the last 50 years.
I mean, I could think of worse debaucheries than eating rasagullas, but we'll allow you your rasagullas.
That's an allegory, please. Okay, so let's assume that I've lived that life and I have at some point of time during that journey gone through the Bhagavad Gita, allowed the Bhagavad Gita to go through me, and my life changed. And now I get diabetes, or I get blood pressure, I have problems that I have caused to myself because of these rasagullas that I have eaten. Now, what should be my state of mind? Will my state of mind be, oh, I am diabetic, I am so troubled? Or is it fine, that's a consequence of what I did earlier, it no longer affects what I am today? That is the transition that this chapter does for us. So in the earlier chapter, we learned about how karma is to be done, and which in chapter 2, he'd already told us, yoga karma sukaushalam, put in your best, and so on and so forth. And then we learned in chapter 3 about what and how karma is. And now we're looking at saying, how do I stop getting affected by the effect of karma? So if there's a question here, otherwise I have a very interesting thought here.
Yes.
So the thought is, Eika, who are you?
See, this is where it gets very complicated. I'm very tempted to tell you who I am, what I do, the organization that I run, the emotions that I run, the roles and responsibilities.
So can I tell you a very interesting story with Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi?
Yes.
So there was this two neighbors, Ramesh and Suresh. Ramesh they had very similar lives. Okay, they had a wife, they had 2 children, and their wives, sorry to be gender biased here, but their wives used to shout at them and all of that. So, but Ramesh used to be very nice, calm in his entire demeanor right through, and Suresh used to get very, very perturbed. So Suresh goes to Ramesh and says, Ramesh, how do you do this? How do you manage to remain calm despite the fact that your children don't study, or you're called to a PTA and they're told all these sort of things? Your wife sometimes gets angry enough to throw pots and pans at you. How do you remain calm? So he says, you see, I go to this guru, and this guru, I've learned to become peaceful because of him. So he said, no, I have to go there. So Suresh goes there, expecting that this guru is going to give him some vibhuti or some magic totka, which is going to help him to become calm. Ramesh introduces Suresh. Suresh then bows down before this great person who happened to be Ramana Maharshi. So Ramana Maharshi looks at him and says, who are you? So he says, my name is Suresh. And so he says, yeah, I understand. That's your name. But who are you? So he says, oh, okay, I live in Madurai. That's where you live. I am Suresh from Madurai. Right, that's where you live. My father's name was Ramadurai. Right, that was your father's name. Who are you? Okay, go to that pillar, sit down and think about it. Now what happened is 4 days of this thinking, and then he went back home, and his wife caught hold of him. Kahan gaye the? Where were you? You have been missing for 3 days. He said, no, I went with Ramesh to his guru. I have told you so many times, don't go about looking for these Babajis. He said, wait. Before that, tell me, who are you? Starting to question who I am straight away is a very difficult point to start off with. But let me ask you a very simple question now. And let's try and make this very simple. And we've touched upon this earlier. My sense of I did not change despite the fact that my body grew bigger, grew smaller, and all things have happened. I mean, by happenstance, by bad luck, let's say that I get into an accident and my hand is cut off or my leg is cut off, my sense of I is not going to become one leg less.
Yes.
Right? My emotions keep changing, my intellectual capacities keep changing, but my I remains same. The I is the witness. This I is the witness, and see, Krishna in this particular chapter, in this particular shloka, very clearly brings that out. Let me quote here. Karmanya karmaya pashed akarmani cha karmayah sabuddhiman manushyeshu sayukta kritsna karma krit. Eika, he says, he who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is a wise person. He's not saying that person is a sadhu. He's not saying that person has achieved moksha. He's saying he's just become wiser. You know why? Because he started seeing the fact that there's a lot of activity going on. My hands are moving right now, right? There's a lot of activity going on. But what is observing this movement is the eyes. Who is observing the eyes watching this is the observer. Bhagavan Shankaracharya talks of this in Dridrishya Vivek. And he clearly says, eyes are being observed by the mind. But who's observing the mind? And that observer is completely in inaction. He's not doing anything. And when I identify, or at least intellectually identify, which is why he's saying not that you realized, but at least you understood it, You are wiser than you were before. And you realize that you do not need to get affected by what is happening in your body, what is happening in your mind, what's happening in your intellect, because you're not that. You're not the body.
But Samir, you are carrying the effect of the diabetes in your body, in your mind, in your intellect.
Yes.
Which has arisen from your desire for the rasgullas and your indulgence of those rasgullas.
Yes.
So it is residing in your body.
Yes, of course.
I understand that you don't identify with your body, but is it possible to, how does one become a forever observer? That then allows me to indulge in any karma, right? Because I am not associated with the phala of that karma.
Correct.
Right? So I can eat as many rasgullas. It is my body that will get diabetes, not me.
Correct.
So how does that work then?
Very good. But nice question. So first, let me tell you as to, so what you actually asked is, the moment I start disengaging from the karma phala itself, the effect of the karma phala itself, then the indulgence in the karma itself will also drop off. Because it's no longer affecting me, right? So the pleasure that I get from Rasagulla is no longer actually a pleasure of mine. It's only a pleasure in the body, and I don't even identify with it. So the pleasure itself has dropped, and I don't go and start indulging in more Rasagullas or running away from the chilies, which is what my entire life had been till this point. Running towards what I like and running away from what I dislike. If you remember, we talked about this, the judgment that we continue to do when we step away from that and look at both of these things as things that are just happening. Now, how do I do that? Obviously, we've said this in the Sankalpa Vakya that Bhagavad Gita is a Yoga Shastra. Yoga Shastra means that which is also gives us practical tips. There's a whole section in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 4, starting from verse 24, ending at verse 31, where Sri Krishna tells us that you approach this entire set of things that you do in the spirit of Yagya. Now, the moment you use the word Yagya, we must agree that, Arjun is right there, and the context of his functioning, Yagya is something that he understands very well.
Yes.
And Yagya is not sacrifice. Let's not use the so-called English translation of sacrifice. So we are going to continue to use the word Yagya. Yagya is work done in the spirit of doing the job with no attachment to the consequences. Now, even when you do a ritual Yagya, right? You do a Agnihotra, you do a Chandi Homa, whatever. You do all of these Yagyas. How do you end the Yagya?
Swaha.
Swaha is when you make the offering.
Right? I offer myself to it.
Whatever you've offered, right? You offered the sari, you offered coconuts, you offered whatever dravya and whatever you offered. But you end it by saying, idam na mama.
Yes.
This is not mine. The consequences are not mine. I have offered them off to you. Now, the moment I do my entire work, life's work in that spirit, and in chapter 4, verse 24, to quote here, Brahmarpanam Brahma Havir Brahmagnau Brahmanahutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. Eika, what he does here is takes the entire process of Yagya, right? The Arpanam, the Havi, that is the offering, the method of offering, the tools that are used for offering, the fire which is in which this is being offered, the process of the offering, all of it, he says, is Brahman. Now, that, Eika, I am sure for somebody who studied the Bhagavad Gita, possibly for years together also, is not very easy to adopt and live into the practical life. And Krishna, if nothing, at least he is a wonderful psychologist, right? We've seen that. So what does he do? He breaks this down into activities. So he says, when you start learning how to control your senses, it is called Indriya Samyamya Yagya. Right? When you breathe, what are you doing? You are doing inward breathing, Prana, you are doing outward breathing. Apana, this process is called pranayama, and this pranayama is nothing but pranayama yagya. Now he takes the process of studying and he calls it Jnana Yagya. He takes the process of sitting and doing manan. He calls it tapas yagya. Now, do you see what he's done? He's taken this whole process of whatever we do in our lives, transformed it into duty, and taken it and said, all of it is therefore yagya. You are doing it with the spirit of offering. You're doing it with the spirit of dedication. You're doing it with the spirit of saying, this is not mine. The effect of this will not be mine.
You know why I love this, Samir? Is because, like I said, this builds up directly from where we left off. Last time we spoke about the transition from sakama karma to nishkama karma. True to me and those that don't. And हमने पिछली बार बात करी थी that the first step of that is just living in awareness of what you're doing, why you're doing, what you're thinking, because everything initiates a karmic transaction, of which there will be an agami karma. I love the fact that from there, and if we've already practiced it, if we've already learned to live in awareness, then here in this adhyaya, Bhagwan Sri Krishna talks to us and elevates it one level above, of saying that now that you're already living in awareness, shift up one level awareness and live with that spirit of conscious heightened awareness and dedication to the task at hand, to the process at hand, and dedication of its surrender. कि मतलब अगर तुम प्राण भी ले रहे हो तो उसको इतने consciously लो कि you are able to have both the element of swaha with it, surrender yourself to it, and the element of
Eika, I'm going to interrupt you here. हम घर में पूजा करते हैं. हाँ. पूजा के लिए प्रसाद बनाते हैं. हाँ. प्रसाद बनाने के टाइम में हम लोग पूरा डेडिकेशन से बनाते हैं. हाँ. ये नहीं सोचते कि प्रसाद अच्छा हुआ कि खराब हुआ, क्योंकि चखते नहीं है. नहीं. नैवेद्य कर लेते हैं. हाँ. और जब प्रसाद के रूप में जब वापस आता है, then what do we do with it? We just eat it. We don't judge it, right? Saying अच्छा बना, खराब बना. We don't say that it was good or bad.
हाँ, you're right. There's no engagement of the senses with that prasad, no? मतलब we have so...
is what Krishna is saying, make your entire life that. Now, why I brought this up, Eika, is a lot of people come back to me and say, is it really possible? I said, you've already done this. You've done it in a small bit of where you took your mind out and you put it into this concept of making prasad and so on and so forth. So just now expand that into your whole life.
So that actually then also answers the question, Samir, that I was asking, कि आप रसगुल्ला तो खा रहे हो भैया, आप मतलब how can you detach from the consequences of the रसगुल्ला कि ये body मेरी नहीं है, तो ये तो मेरी body में diabetes है, मुझे नहीं है, right? The moment we've elevated that consciousness to this level कि हम उस act of eating रसगुल्ला को भी एक यज्ञ माने, तो you are right, हमारा उसके साथ कोई sensorial engagement है ही नहीं. मतलब आप उसमें से इतना टुकड़ा खाएं या 6 रसगुल्ले खाएं, the pleasure, the fulfillment, the sensorial experience that you derive will be the same.
Absolutely.
The moment you've made that the effort, तो फिर वो diabetes होगी नहीं, और हो भी जाएगी तो then you know that you have detached yourself from it. Actually, yeah, मतलब fascinating. Because I find that I do a fair amount of pranayam, or when I'm doing the Jnana yoga जिसकी आप बात कर रहे थे, Jnana Yagya, I see the truth of what you're saying, because the moment I bring in consciousness into my prana, on the breath and the breathing, while you're saying it's just 2 activities, right? I'm inhaling and I'm exhaling, apana. There's a very deep sense of fulfillment and gratitude and surrender
in just doing that act. Correct. So right. Absolutely true.
Wow. And in this, Samir, after this, Bhagwan Sri Krishna talks about the idea of need for an enlightened master. I understand how difficult it is to, forever stay on track and to become better by practice. But how does an enlightened master help me breathe better?
Okay. So, firstly, I think what you talked about, you used the word practice. See, our Upanishads are very clear about this, saying what's the process of learning? The process of learning starts off by saying Shravanan, which is to listen. Listen doesn't necessarily mean listen only with the ears. It's about perceiving, right? It's about taking in inputs. So listening, which could be meaning reading, which could mean conscious reading. It could also mean listening to a talk or listening to this discussion that we are having. It doesn't matter. Then the next part, listening doesn't do anything right now. It has to go to the next part, which is called mananan, reflection, introspection. Unless we have done that, then there are no insights which are mine. I need to have my own insights, right? And unless I have had my own insights, how do I make it mine own, which is the next step, which is to put it into practical use in terms of nididhyasan. So this whole process of learning, which is Shravanan, Mananan, Nididhyasan, these three steps have to happen. Now, for all three to happen, see, you learned how to drive. Now, you just didn't get into a car, read a manual and start driving. You needed somebody to sit down with you and explain, or perhaps you needed to observe somebody who's actually driven a car before. But just imagine, you sit next to a person, you've never driven a car before, you've never seen a car before, you get there and you're sitting next to a person who's also never driven a car, or at least is never driven a car in front of you, and starts telling you the theory of how to drive a car. Do you think you'll really be able to drive a car, or at least will keep people around you safe?
No, obviously. What's up?
So what does Krishna
What
say?
is that risk?
So Krishna is going to say something here. Let me quote. So Krishna says, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Eika, what he says is, Tadvidhi. So this is actually this shloka is, I think it's a question to, rather it's an answer to an asked question. It's a question that Arjuna is possibly thinking and saying, okay, I've understood all the yagyas. I've understood that my life has to become a yagya. I understand that there are practical implications to this. How do I get there? How do I come to know? So he says, you will know, tadvidhi, by doing pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. Three things he talks about. Pranipatena, by the surrender of the ego. Pranipatena literally means to fall flat in front of somebody. Pranipatena is not here in terms of physically falling flat, but surrendering that huge burden that we carry with ourselves called the ego. Pariprashnena, I'll come back to that. The sevaya. Seva here does not mean sit down and press the legs of your guru, but it actually means put into practice what he teaches you. And then comes that bridging part, which is pariprashna. Pariprashna is questioning after experiencing, not questioning out of idle curiosity, not questioning of saying, why does he have a beard? Why does he not have a beard? Or you are given an instruction and the first reaction is, why should I do that? Right? I mean, that's the millennial behavior. So why should I do that? The student who really wants to go forward has already surrendered the ego. So he therefore questions by, after going there, doing what the teacher has said, and then experiences something, comes back, validates his experiences through the teacher. Now, how can he validate? He can only validate if the teacher himself has had that sort of an experience, right? Yes. So he is Jnani and Tattvadarshi. Jnani means he knows the theory, and Tattvadarshi means he's also experienced it himself. I'm sorry if I'm going to be a little critical, but you see, there's a whole bunch of gurus available in today's guru shopping world. And a lot of them actually say, it's not important to read the scripture. It's not important to read any books at all. It's just important for you to follow whatever I'm telling you to do. Bhagavad Gita says, no, that's not how it works. It works by questioning. It works by you internalizing, applying, and having an experience which is not what you have experienced before. So come back and validate that. And that's why I normally say that, and this is my personal saying, that you need somebody with who you can interact, somebody with who you can go and ask, somebody with who you can have a personal equation, which allows you to get your doubts cleared.
I mean, this is the reason why you have coaches in sports and coaches in the management workplace. They may not be as exalted or as evolved as a realized enlightened master. They exist so that they can be your beacon, they can be your guiding force. And in fact, when you talk about the questions, I'm actually reminded of how there are three kinds of questions. We've spoken about it very, very often. So there are three kinds of questions that you want to bring in. The first level of questions is the Madhikari questions.
Correct.
Other Madhikari questions are what we call confirmatory questions. These are questions that are pointless questions. They exist only to confirm a thought. Matlab, they add no value. So, तुमने खाना खा लिया, तुम सो गए हो. Would you like me to bring this to you? So, questions that are simply confirmatory questions. These are your Adha Madhikari lowest level questions. They have their place, but that's all that they'll give to you. The second level questions are called the Madhyam Adhikari questions.
Correct.
The Madhyam Adhikari questions are what we call clarificatory questions. So these are questions asked either when you're confirming or clarifying something. Did you really want me to put 1 spoon of ghee in this halwa that I'm making? Or these are questions that are meant to show off knowledge. So pointless. So, do you know what happened yesterday? Of course, you don't know what happened yesterday, and of course, I know what happened yesterday, and I'm dying to show it off to you. So these are clarificatory or Madhyam Adhikari questions.
Correct.
Most of our lives are spent between these Adham Adhikari and Madhyam Adhikari, clarificatory and confirmatory and clarificatory questions. But the real questions, the questions that actually have meaning and are, help you understand and make sense of the world, are what are called Uttam Adhikari questions. These are questions that come out of curiosity, wonder, increasing your sense and knowledge of the world or wisdom around the world, right? So these are called curiosity questions. These are questions that have meaning. And these questions, like Samir is rightly saying, arise or can come up with them only when you are curious, when you open your eyes, when there's an experience you've been through, when there's something, and which is why I love those 3 steps of, after you meet your master, those 3 steps. The first is Pratipadena, just the surrender of your ego. We've spoken about this theme earlier as well in both chapter 2 and chapter 1. So clearly, Bhagwan Sri Krishna has been saying forever, कि भाई ego त्यागो, जब तक ego नहीं त्यागोगे, कुछ नहीं सीख पाओगे. So that's the first step. And then go out and experience before you come back and question and validate. And do come back and question and validate. Because if you blindly experienced and have no curiosity or questions about that experience, then that experience hasn't gone through you. That's the third part of what we've learned today. And how the Jnana Karma Sanyas Yoga then is lived out. The second part, and I'm going to go in reverse order. So the third part is about finding a master. The second part, which is what you do before this, is, like we said, heighten your awareness from just awareness of your thought, your emotions, and your intellect and your actions. Lift it upwards to flip your attitude, to flip your perspective, and view everything in life as a yagya. It is your dedication. It is your dedication, surrender, and submission, both to yourself, to the task at hand, and to the universe. Whether it's eating food, whether it's taking a breath, whether it's about teaching, whether it's about studying, whether it's about the jobs we do in our corporate places, whether it's a relationship that we have. Just lift the level of what you're doing to the level of a yagya. And surrender. Surrender at 2 levels. The first is swaha, offer yourself completely into it. And the second aspect of that is idi namama. The effect does not accrue for me. I am giving it up. I am surrendering. It is for the world at large. And therefore, in order to be able to view the world as a yagya and every process as a yagya, it's critical to move back to that first level. Every action has inaction in it, and every inaction has action in it. When you're sitting in silence, there is still action. And when you are in the middle of action, there is still silence and stillness. In fact, I have a military background, and very often when I speak to military officers who tell me about their war training, they often talk about how in the middle of the war always is the eye of the storm, in the center. So it's like a storm that's happening all around you, but you need to find your calmness, your stillness. In that action, you find that inaction. This, by the way, is also a build up to that driving awareness. As you see, we are building up in the concepts that we've introduced earlier, and how beautifully Bhagwan Sri Krishna is just adding every one layer with every adhyaya that we cover. And therefore, we had spoken about how everything is karma, every breath is karma. And now Bhagwan Sri Krishna says, even while you're breathing, even while there's silence, there is action in it. And even while there is inaction and war and heat and tumult and trouble, find the silence in it. It is there. Right? And therefore, this has been our learning of recognizing that when you're in action, elevate the level of that action. Elevate action to inaction and silence. Elevate inaction to action and activity. That's the knowledge level, the karma and the jnana. Similarly, when you're doing and you're aware of your karma in the body, in the mind, in the intellect, elevate it with jnana into the level of a yagya. And similarly, at the third level, when you're experiencing, make sure that you're doing this with an enlightened master who can actually elevate the level of your karma to the jnana, somebody you can question, surrender to, and follow. And with that, it is with absolute gratitude that I'm looking forward to the next chapter as we close our adhyaya of chapter 4 of the Jnana Karma Sanyas Yoga.
Iti Srimad-Bhagavad-Gitasu Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Jnana Karma Sanyasa Yogo Nama Chaturthodhyayah. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Na 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 na.